Hello and welcome to another episode of Quickies with Angela and Caity.
I'm Angela Dawn of Authentic Heart Coaching. I'm a tantric sex coach and I help couples get closer.
And I'm Caity Wilkinson of Caity Coaches. I'm a sex, love, and relationship coach, and I can help you bring more pleasure to your partnership by bringing more pleasure to yourself. Our guest for this episode is Dr. Sara Jaye Fenton, a holistic acupuncturist. Sara is trained in Five Element and traditional Chinese medicine styles of acupuncture and is bringing the wisdom of Chinese medicine to our bedrooms today.
Right, Caity? I am truly excited to have Dr. Fenton with us today. Sara Jaye and I have known each other for many years, first as acquaintances around town, and then in a doctor-patient relationship, and now we're friends and collaborators. In fact, I'm having Dr. Fenton as a guest expert in my new coaching container for perimenopausal and menopausal women next month. So listen to the end of this podcast to hear the details on that. But I thought we could get the ball rolling now with Sara's knowledge here today on our podcast.
I am so curious about what Sara is going to be sharing with us in this episode. Angela, you and I, we've studied Tantra in our coach training, and it has a lot of overlap with Taoism. And of course, we deal with somatics, AKA the body, with our work as coaches. But we don't have a background in Chinese medicine. So I know that Sara's going to have some really cool information to share with both of us and our entire audience here today. So welcome, Sara.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah.
So first, Sara, can you tell our listeners a bit about your background and really what prompted you to study Chinese medicine?
Sure. I've always been very curious and inquisitive about the world, and especially the things that don't always come apparently and meet the eye, more the metaphysical. So I started leaning into Eastern philosophy naturally through that. And in my early 20s, I found yogic practice, asana, meditation through the Transcendental Meditation Center. And I came to acupuncture just to try it out because yin and yang are balance. And I just wanted to see what it was about. And it really supported me in so many ways. I didn't tell the guy I had anxiety. It helped my anxiety. Years later, I had a really grave concussion. And I did the Western medical route, except for the narcotics that they really wanted to give me. And it wasn't really helping. So I tried acupuncture for physical, head trauma, and acupuncture completely changed my condition and helped heal me. So I decided, how could I be the change and be able to give this back to people, and started studying the medicine.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. I love hearing about that path through, Eastern types of medicine and how you got here.
What a fascinating journey. So our listeners are probably not necessarily familiar with what Chinese medicine or acupuncture are, maybe acupuncture, but I'm also not familiar with either of those modalities. So Sara, could you give us a broad strokes definition of what these are?
Absolutely. So Chinese medicine encompasses acupuncture and other East Asian medical traditions and modalities. So some of those are physical, almost manipulative, like cupping, which is pretty popular now. And then gua sha, which is similar to cupping, body modalities working. I think it's called IATSM or something in the physical therapy world. And then acupuncture itself is using very fine needles the size of a whisker or so, and inserting them into acupoints along the body. There is a myriad of about 365 acupoints along meridians, and there are 12 primary meridians that flow through our body. Just like how we have nerves moving and blood vessels moving, there are acupuncture channels that are all over our body from head to toe.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. The amount of study that goes into learning all of that is so incredible. And glad to have Sara here because she's so knowledgeable and can unpack this for us. Definitely not something you can just pick up, right?
No, and if someone does just pick it up, do not trust them.
Right.
Don't buy acupuncture needles on Amazon.
Exactly. Not good. Yeah. So let's get into the meat of what I want to talk about today. How can this ancient Chinese science help us with intimacy issues? I've heard of TCM being used for infertility and period issues, ED, low libido, premature ejaculation, even sexual anxiety. What are the limits here, right? What kind of sexual issues do you help patients with most often in your practice?
Sure. Everything you mentioned, I help people currently with and have helped with in the past.
Cool.
And I would say the limits are, first of all, structural. Like, so if someone had their ovaries removed, I can't help them get pregnant. That's just
Right.
impossible.
Yeah.
It's not working. However, there is so much that could be done. So in a fertility sense, I have women that have low ovarian reserve that I've helped get pregnant. And, you know, Western medicine many times couldn't find a reason. I have one woman I'm thinking of that had 11 miscarriages before she started acupuncture. For fertility, it's really important to come to acupuncture right before, like well before your IVF cycle, if possible, or with 3 months before you plan to try. So we have plenty of time to do groundwork. But she was able to carry a healthy pregnancy all the way through, that woman who had all of the miscarriages. And on the men's side of infertility, helps with motility. They're Chinese herbs. That's a big part of our medicine, is using herbs that really come just from plants. Sometimes some bones and shells and occasionally a gecko. I think now in the PETA age, they found other substances and ways without harming animals. But needless to say, there's a lot of tools at disposal for herbs helping with all kinds of things. Definitely herbs I'm thinking of right off the top of my head that help with nocturnal emission and pre-ejaculation as well. And as far as anxiety and intimacy issues, this is like where I really thrive in my practice, and what I seem to attract are the people that are looking for something a little bit deeper and have some of those bigger questions that are beyond the physical, so to say. Love the physical, and often, if not always, physical, emotional, and mental collapse together, right? There is no separation. So it's really important to be able to acknowledge how someone is coming to sex, right? My women that are trying to get pregnant, they tend to be on timetables, and it's like, okay, today is day 11, so we have to do it 3 times. And like, where's the fun in that? You know, like
Yeah.
it's, you're supposed to have fun trying. So I remind my clients, both men and women and in between, to have fun and enjoy, because things are not going to flow smoothly if there's a tension and a tightness, right? Like, how am I going to enjoy myself if I'm tight and I'm deadline and I'm focused? Whereas you take a breath, you get a little music going, whatever it is, just to enjoy and right move. This is nature, right? The animals are not like calculating everything. We come from that. We know somatically this is all in our bodies. And oftentimes the imbalances, just since we're talking about fertility, that occur with infertility, or because we're in a society that demands we have an 8-hour workday, that demands and does not have a setup for women's care, but pre and post, and men too, having children. So there's a lot of pressure and getting things done, which ends up depleting us, right? If you can think of a time, anyone, any job, any circumstance where you have an 8 to 10-hour day, you are exhausted at the end of that. Now think about doing that in the middle of winter when, you know, we're in springtime now, but just after the sun goes down at 4 p.m. and you're still working. It's hard on the system, it's hard on the body. And we are pushing ourselves through that and pulling on very sacred and limited reserves that we have, right? So everything for me is in the context of chi. And chi is, think about it as like metabolism, the capacity to do work, the capacity to have the motility of the sperm, the capacity for the circulation of the sexual fluids to be moving so that a woman is lubricated, right? We need to have a balance in order to allow this very natural process to unfold. I will also say that through trauma and anxiety and the emotional like betrayal aspects of it, I've helped people through this too. You know, you can imagine the worst, and I've helped someone I'm thinking of who was unable to achieve orgasm at all through a couple of treatments and a very different form of relationship they were engaging in with a new partner, with safety and trust that had been pre-built before they became intimate. That person was able to achieve orgasm again when, you know, Western medicine, and actually my mentor told me they would never achieve orgasm again. And yeah, and this came from, sure, you know, like I'm helping make sure that they're drinking enough water, which if you take away anything from today, just drink water, please. It helps everything. It helps me. It helps you. All you have to do is drink water, more than a glass. Promise you will move and lubricate a lot better, both ends, if you're drinking enough water. But this person, we focused more on what's called the pericardium, the heart protector meridian. So not to get too out there or nerd out too much, but one of those 12 primary meridians is called the heart protector, the pericardium, which actually is a little sac that protects the heart organ itself. And again, chi being the capacity to do work, functionality, more than protecting the heart physically, this meridian is associated with intimacy, boundaries, connection, vulnerability, right? So if you've been betrayed and you're going to kind of close down and try to protect your heart because you've been in a situation or had an experience with someone, maybe you even just got ghosted on, this Tinder still out? Like,
it is. Ghosting still happens. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm grateful I don't have to worry right now about that. So that has a physiological impact on us in terms of Chinese medicine. And I will say also in my experience clinically in terms of physicality in the body too, right? So the heart protects itself, it closes off, and it's hard for these sexual secretions that this circulation meridian is in charge of to flow if there's something that's holding tight. So one of the meridian points, again, the meridians run head to toe. This specific meridian runs from the wrist to the center of the chest. And there's a point on the center of the wrist called the inner frontier gate. And just as an example, we can use the acupressure or the acupuncture point, the inner frontier gate, 3 fingers down from the center of the wrist, to activate that aspect of appropriately opening and closing our heart in terms of intimacy, in terms of boundaries with other people, with how we show up with ourselves in the world. And this is for someone who, like we were talking about, has kind of closed off, but this is also in the other extreme, right? Yin, yang, night, day. The other extreme would be someone who is just totally open-hearted, constantly connecting. Look at my big eyes, right? Just really into it, really engaged. Everybody's their best friend. You're standing in line at the coffee shop and they're telling you their life story. And you're like, I literally just met you. I don't need to know about what happened to you in 5th grade, lady. I just want my coffee, or, you know, whatever, right? So this point also activates for someone who is navigating in terms of appropriate use of boundaries and discerning that. All of that is going to tie into how we show up with intimacy and how physiologically our sex organs and fluids are working. How is that clear enough? Does that make some understanding? Do you have any questions about anything that I've said?
That's incredible. Just letting it all sink in for a moment.
Right. Yeah. I was just really thinking about, you know, some of the work that I do with my clients in terms of, you know, somatic work, right? And having them find things in their body that are blocked or closed off and working with that. And it's so interesting to hear about like the Chinese medicine angle versus, you know, more like the psychology angle or the somatic angle. Yeah, it all works really well together. Mm-hmm.
Especially hearing about the heart protection in general. Definitely.
Yeah. How incredible is it that we have an inherent protector inside of ourselves, and that protector is also connected to an aspect that is an observer, right? I know you guys talk about and practice meditation as well, and we have a part of ourselves that is kind of a priori removed from all experience in our life, and we can connect with that part that is untarnished, that is unbroken. It's called anahata, right? In the chakra tradition, my yogic background comes in. And that's inherent. So we just, as acupuncturists, tap into that and help someone who can't see or maybe is unaware of where it's blocked. They don't even have to talk about it. It's all can be below the level of consciousness. I don't need to know someone's trauma. I just put the points in place and this knot unties itself. Now, if someone's conscious, if they're drinking the water, and I often refer people for psychological work and for somatic work too, right? See your chiropractor, go to a yoga class. Please don't eat McDonald's. These all contribute to a more healthy human.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible. So the $1 million question here, well, actually, two questions. One, do the needles hurt? And two, does Chinese medicine actually work? How often is this successful in your experience?
First of all, Chinese medicine has been around for like 5,000 years. So there must be something to it if we're still using it. It's one of the most worldwide used modalities in medicines. So that's pretty, I feel like that's evidence right there. If you want to look into like quantitative work and studies, PubMed, and I think it's NCBI, all of those clinical trials and studies have so much data on acupuncture's effectiveness and efficacy. And like preparing to talk to you ladies today, I looked up that there's a systematic review that showed that acupuncture supports desire, libido, ED, all types of things through a meta-analysis that they took. So, you know, just like put that into Google, boom, you're going to find a lot. Clinically, as I've said, I've supported people with a number of just these kind of sexual and intimacy imbalances that we've talked about. And again, the context of acupuncture and Chinese medicine is that dis-ease is an imbalance, a disharmony. So the natural state is harmonious. And oftentimes we just need to get out of the way of what nature's doing or align ourselves and go to bed at 5 p.m. when we're tired, even though no one wants to do that. It's okay. You can do that. Naps are very welcome. And as far as the needles themselves, they're like as thin as a whisker. So oftentimes people do not feel or notice them. I treat a lot of clients, often big burly guys that are covered in tattoos that are very terrified of needles. And we just breathe in and breathe out and they realize you don't feel it. And if anything's uncomfortable, it's very, you know, like a mosquito bite. It just happens and it's gone. There's no way I can like damage a nerve. A needle's not that big or could hit that in any way, can't go through blood vessels, maybe tiny capillaries. Like if you look up the side effects, very limited bruising, right? Maybe a little local swelling or itchiness, histamine reaction, but it's a very cost-effective and gentle modality.
As somebody terrified of needles, that you actually make it sound pretty pleasant. I'm very, very curious here.
Katie, it's pleasant.
Is that what it felt like for you, Angela?
My acupuncture naps are the best. I will send anybody to acupuncture. I'm a big believer. Just from my own personal experience with it, it's helped me with so many things.
The concept that somebody could fall asleep while having all of these needles inserted into their body, that's wow.
Yeah, you do.
Wow.
You do. It's like more relaxing than getting a massage, in my opinion. Yeah.
It
Incredible.
is yin versus yin and yang, you know, like we're in a yang state, active, moving, ready to go. And it helps that sympathetic system, parasympathetic rest and digest, supplementing and supporting the yin. And I will say, Katie, being an acupuncturist and having received acupuncture for over 10 years, I have never once fallen asleep on the table, but many do, but not all of us do. So, but it is extremely relaxing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's nice to hear about the difference in experience too, that somebody shouldn't necessarily expect that level of relaxation, but they will experience some release and a lot of peace with it. More peace than somebody who's terrified of needles would have expected from that kind of experience.
Yeah.
I also love
Go ahead.
Oh, Angela, you can go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm not saying I always fall asleep, but I have been known to wake myself up snoring. When I get
That could be worse. Yeah. Sara, I loved the point that you made about how with consciousness, like this doesn't necessarily need to be something that somebody fully believes in to be able to see results and get results and feel the changes internally within themselves. I think that's so incredibly beautiful as well.
It is. It's so safe and accessible. I spend a lot of time, 2 days a week. I work in a drug and alcohol detox and rehabilitation center. And in my experience, clinically, often people coming off of these substances are realizing that they've been using them to cover up mental illness or significant trauma. Truly, you know, it's very rare that I meet someone that cannot pinpoint something traumatic that's happened in their lives. And acupuncture, again, doesn't have to talk about it. We just move what needs to be moved, shock in the circulatory system, whatever it is. so it can peacefully unfold. And sometimes it takes a little time to help the body move from fight and flight into rest and digest, but it's a very, again, gentle way to support that. And I will say, in terms of consciousness, also, I think animals are conscious, and they can't tell us that they're hurting often not in words. But we may see signs that they're hurting, and I've taken my dogs for acupuncture and my cats and seen results. And there's incredible data out in Leesburg, Virginia, which is closer to you than us, I would suppose. But there's a huge acupuncture for horses like collective out there, because it's such big horse country, and equine acupuncture has exploded for show horses and also competitive horse activities as well. So yeah, animals are not, there's no placebo, because they don't have an opinion about it. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's one of the things that made me interested and think that I'm kind of sold on it.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
all right. Well, I got another big question here. This is my big question for Sara. It's probably why I asked you on the podcast, Sara. So, really, like, according to Chinese medicine, how often should we be having sex? Right? I'm guessing this differs for men and women, and differs by age. And I should say there's really like a second, more pointed question that I have. Is it accurate to say we should be having less sex as we age? This is something I've heard before in acupuncture circles, and it kind of rubs me the wrong way as a sex coach, because I feel like orgasms are a disease buster, right? But there's this idea that it also could reduce life force. So I'm really curious about that.
Before you answer, Sara, I'd love to jump in here and just remind our listeners that penetrative or orgasm-seeking sex is different than sexual intimacy in general, because sexual intimacy in general is going to include all forms of touch and connection time without necessarily seeking a goal. And I'd never want someone to superficially limit their connection time with their beloved based on anybody else's beliefs. I'm also curious, Angela, if you mean orgasms versus ejaculation, since we have talked before about ejaculation from a spiritual view having a different level of, say, energy drain on the body than like a non-ejaculatory orgasm, like when someone with a penis practices being able to orgasm multiple times without ejaculating each time.
Right. So that's where we get into distinctions on the difference between men and women too, right? Like, the typically female bodies can have multiple orgasms without it being draining, right? And this is kind of some of what I wanted to hear Sara talk about, because I think orgasms are really wonderful for women, and we should be having lots of them. And I've heard acupuncturists say, well, not as you get older. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So I want to hear what Sara had to say.
Katie, I love that distinction. Thank you for bringing that up. That's fantastic. And intimacy is connection and union in its ultimacy, and that is the most beautiful, truest thing that I know, right? Love, real love. So thank you for bringing that up. In terms of, let me give some context for the Chinese medical perspective in this. So in terms of men and women and all beings, we have a limited and inherited amount of pure essence, which is called Jing. I want you to think of Jing like the most dense form of qi that's inherited from our ancestors, and we just come in with a certain amount. So that's like the center of the egg, the yolk. Around the egg white, is our qi, our blood, everything we're doing lifestyle-wise that we're building in, so that we don't have to pull from that precious center. There are a few things that automatically pull from that precious center. One of them is having children, and having children is because for women, that essence, that Jing, is connected to the ova, and for men, that's semen. So having children is you're giving it's essence, like you literally are creating life, right? So in terms of orgasm, women are not depositing ova when they're orgasming. That's through menstruation. So we'll have a conversation about menstruation. However, for men, if they are ejaculating, achieving orgasm through ejaculation and depositing sperm, that's going to pull Jing. So the Chinese medical perspective is, as time goes on, men and women should be having less less sex in order to conserve these valuable resources that we're limited on, and that as time we start having to pull from, because we only have so much chi. We know chi is getting diminished because hair becomes more gray, fluids become more consumed, right? Our energy, our reserves, we might not have the get up and go that we have. Now, we can help that, especially as it's imbalanced, but everybody has their time. And if we truly want to conserve our resources, there's this ancient acupuncturist and Chinese medical doctor Sun Simiao, who I believe said, for men specifically, he was talking about men, that the ideal would be 2 orgasms, ejaculations a month, so 24 a year, and that should continue diminishing from the age 60 forward, really not much at all. So that's the perspective. Again, for women, most of this comes from menstruation. So we're losing essence since we menstruate. And even if we're taking contraceptives that are preventing menstruation, that process is still happening in the body. And depending on the contraceptive, there is a pull on the body and the system from taking that contraceptive, because you are inhibiting, right, the body's own mechanisms to get the hormonal cascade going. You're adding something else, so it has to readjust to support that. But for women, orgasm specifically, you're not losing any jing, so technically not an issue, and women can continue to have more orgasms.
That's what I'm saying. That's all.
That's all we need. That's all.
I just wanted to hear Sara say it. Like, that's my philosophy. That's like one of the reasons why I wanted to start like a group coaching program that's specifically for mature women, is there's so many good things that orgasms do for women, right? Like, the more you have orgasms, like the more lubricated you can become, the more the better your vaginal tissue is with age, right? Like, there's a lot of things that different, and I'm not saying it has to be penetrative intimacy. I'm just saying, like, intimacy in general is very healthy for women's bodies when it's done right. And, anybody listening, if you don't know about it being done right, you need to get our pussy whispering class for men and women, which is on special right now. So that's how you do it right. And it's good for women. And I don't think it's something that people need to give up on, and we can keep on trying to train the men in non-ejaculatory orgasm, because that's brilliant,
I know a couple of submissive men that would probably be a little more excited than other gentlemen hearing that in their 60s they should be ejaculating.
Say, Katie, so like the non-ejaculatory orgasms that men can have, in my experience with Tantra, are outstanding. I'm not going to say it feels the same as having an ejaculation, but watching a man have a full body orgasm and see his entire body vibrate when he hasn't ejaculated, it's astounding. It's a much longer orgasm. It's crazy. So anybody interested in that should work with a professional and pursue it, because there are contraindications medically to withholding ejaculation. So you definitely want to talk to somebody that knows what the heck they're doing. So anyway, I have more questions for you, Sara. I also want to talk about the yang and the yin of sex, right? I don't like to get into strict polarity dynamics. I'm, really kind of against that view, because everybody has the yang and the yin, but I'm really curious about that concept and how you might explain it in terms of Chinese medicine, Sara.
Sure. Yin and yang are polarities, so we have to start there, but that doesn't mean in terms of gender, obviously, that has to apply. Yang is the sun, yang is daytime. And I'm saying yang, not yang, but I mean yang. I'm just trying to say yang with the accent. So that's daytime, assertiveness, dominance, movement. Yin, the nighttime, cooling, receptivity, more submissive. Anybody can show up in any of these. And if you know the Tai Chi symbol, the yin yang symbol, as people say, there's always a little drop of yin in the yang, and there's always a little drop of yang in the yin, right? So everybody has these qualities and we show up differently. And it's a dance. It's always, always, always a dance and a movement. So just because it's one way, one day, you know, we just had the equinox. So we had the perfect balance of day and night, but now we're heading toward the summer solstice. So there's going to be more daylight than nighttime, right? So it's in flux.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that explanation.
So Sara, if a member of our audience is curious to learn more about Chinese medicine, what advice would you give them in terms of books or practitioners they could follow, maybe any online resources they could check out, or what to look for in a practitioner if they're considering hiring someone to experience this firsthand?
Sure, absolutely. I suck at social media, so one day maybe you can follow me. But there are some incredible people out there. I like Dr. Lily Choi. She's on Instagram, and Dr. Liz Carter. They both come from different perspectives. So there's styles of acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, 5-element, classical acupuncture, Kiko, blah, 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 blah. Dr. Lily Choi is more of this classical TCM, and Dr. Liz Carter gives a lot of the 5-element perspective. The 5-element perspective is going to be more about the functionality of the officials of those channels. So when I talk about the metaphor of intimacy in the pericardium, you're going to find more of that with the 5-element style. And the 5 elements relate to the seasons and cycles, and it's everything. TCM, 5-element, Chinese medical context is going to be very holistic and big picture looking and holographically breaking things down. 5-element puts it in those terms. TCM is going to be very functional based. So traditionally more TCM practitioners would be using herbs, I would say. There are 5-element acupuncturists that use herbs too, in incredible ways. I use herbs for intimacy. I speak both languages. I'm trained in both. But TCM, I would say, is a little more like, it came from a standardized practice, like post-communist China. So it's very standardized, right? Which is good. Some people want to be standardized. 5 elements, like we tend to talk to our clients a lot, like I spend 15 to 20 minutes every single session. Yeah. Just chatting with you. You might not. Now, my practitioners are both more 5-element style. So I talk to them too. I'm not sure, but I don't think you're going to find that as much conversation with the TCM trained practitioner. Both incredible and amazing, and I love them. So we've talked about Instagram, we've talked about styles. You want someone that has a master of acupuncture. That is our certification. Our licensure comes from that. It's over 3,000 hours of study. Like you were saying, it's a lot. At least 1,000 of those are in clinical practice that's supervised. So essentially clinical rotation. So they must be a master of acupuncture. There are doctors, medical doctors that take classes to train in acupuncture. There are chiropractors. There are PTs that do techniques of acupuncture. But for what we're talking about, you want an acupuncturist, right? We're focusing on more than physical. The other practitioners are great for physical, and we just have this context and lineage of the philosophy and the holism of the medicine as opposed to a weekend class learning courses. And I don't want to ditch them because there are some great practitioners out there, and I really support the more ways we can support people through other practitioners, like picking things up and supporting. And when we're being really conscious and specific, let's look for acupuncturists. So last thing I'll say is books. If you're just curious and you want to pull out a book, Between Heaven and Earth, it's a really great view, and Nourishing Destiny, written by my teacher, Lonnie Jarrett. That will just give you depth and context and an evolutionary context for this medicine and what it can offer. And I'll leave that.
Oh, wonderful. Sara, I'm going to check out some of these people you suggested following, and at least one of those books. I'm excited to dive in more. And I really appreciate the distinction you made from practitioners who use techniques of acupuncture versus acupuncturists. And I feel like what we're talking about here, we're talking about the mind and the body. We're talking about somatics. We're talking about helping people with what might seem like a physical dysfunction, but we know really has a deep source in the body. And I think when we're trying to draw that mind-body connection, we really should be looking for a practitioner that has the big view. So yeah, perfect.
All righty. And that about wraps up this episode. Thank you so much for your time here today, Sara, and for sharing your expertise and your insights with us.
Yeah, thank you, Sara. This has been so awesome. And do you want to share your website? I know you said you're not great on social media, but maybe your website for your practice if anyone's interested in checking you out.
Yeah, you can find me Dr. Sara Jaye on Instagram and Facebook, and eventually I'll post more there. But my website, my business is Evergreen Holistic Healing. I have a practice space in Annapolis, Maryland. And right now I've got a month and a half wait list for new clients. But if you are committed, you can sign on. And if not, you're looking for someone sooner, I'm always happy to find someone in your area or give my recommendation and just support people getting support. So thank you both so much. This has been an absolute pleasure and a lot of fun. You popped my podcast cherry. So thank you.
Wow. I didn't know it was your first time, Sara.
Honor.
Yeah. So thank you very, very much.
And that's all for this episode of Quickies with Angela and Caity. Thank you for listening, and you can follow us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.
And if you'd like more great information on sex, love, and relationships, be sure to follow us on social media. I am Angela, and you can find me at Authentic Heart Coaching on Instagram or on the web at AuthenticHeartCoach.com.
And you can find me on CaityCoaches.com as well as on Instagram at CaityCoaches.
And I want to shout this out for our male listeners. We did talk a little bit about non-ejaculatory sex on this episode, but anyone that's curious about lasting longer in bed, and I would say that's probably your first step toward non-ejaculatory orgasm. Yeah, often people want to delay their ejaculation, and you should check out our Stamina 101 mini course for men. It's completely free and will guide you through a week of simple but powerful exercises to transform your relationship with your erection and your orgasm.
And speaking of orgasm, we have a spectacular class bundle called Pussy Whispering, all about vulva pleasure and creating the most spectacular orgasms and sexual aliveness and connection, both with yourself and with your partner. Pussy Whispering is for all experience levels. We demystify cis female pleasure and make it simpler and easier and more accessible to really get more out of sex. You can visit pwclass.com to learn more.
Yes, I'm so excited for our women's version of that course. And you all heard me mention earlier on the podcast that Dr. Fenton will be one of the guest experts in my Peri-Pleasure group coaching program for women. This is going to be a very special container where mature women are going to have access to my coaching and tons of other expert guidance for a fraction of the cost of one-to-one coaching. So if you join in this program, you'll get 2 individual sessions with me, 5 group classes with me, 3 sessions with experts, one being Dr. Fenton on Chinese medicine. I also have an expert on hormones and one on the pelvic floor. Plus, you'll get the Pussy Whispering for Women class as a bonus. So that class that Caity was just talking about, this program is going to run in May, and I'm taking enrollments until May 1st, but don't wait to sign up because you can actually get started with the video course and your individual coaching sessions with me as soon as you sign up. So check out the show notes for the link or go to AuthenticHeartCoach.com and go to my calendar and you'll see it under May 1. For couples, I have some exciting programs coming up in May as well. Massage for him on May 5th and then my signature Get Closer Couples Tantra workshop on May 19th. Last time, the Get Closer sold out, so don't wait to grab your ticket. And in addition to those couples programs in May, you may have heard me announce the Get Closer Couples Retreat for July 24 in Costa Rica. In the show notes, you'll find a link to learn more about that retreat. And don't hesitate to reach out to me, AngelaDawn at AuthenticHeartCoach.com. We can set up a time to talk about whether the last couple of spots open in the retreat are right for you and your partner.
And with that said, we'll see you next time on Quickies with Angela and Caity.